The sky above Metropolis did not just turn dark. It tore open like cheap fabric. Clouds burned away in a split second. A pink fire poured out of the rip in reality. It did not look like heat vision or magic. It felt heavy. The air grew thick and hard to breathe. People on the street stopped their cars. They looked up. They did not scream yet. They were too confused. The Justice League watchtower was the first casualty. It fell from orbit like a broken toy. It burned as it entered the atmosphere. The metal groaned and twisted as it plummeted toward the ocean. Inside the Hall of Justice, alarms screamed. Screens flashed red warnings. Batman looked at the monitors. He saw energy readings he had never seen before. It was not kryptonite. It was not the Speed Force. It was something wild and angry. It felt ancient and wrong. Superman was already in the air. He flew toward the falling station to catch it. He moved faster than sound. But something else was faster. A man in black clothes stood in the sky. He had spiky hair that looked like strange black fire. He wore a single green earring. He looked down at the world with eyes full of hate. He did not look like a monster. He looked like a man. But his energy felt like a god who had lost his mind. Superman stopped mid-air. He felt a chill go down his spine. This stranger did not care about power or money. He looked at the city like a human looks at an infestation of ants. The man raised his hand. A blade of purple light formed around his hand. It hummed with a terrible sound. The stranger swung his hand. A wave of purple energy sliced through the clouds. It hit the ocean far away. The water boiled instantly. A massive wave rose up. The impact shook the ground in Metropolis. Windows shattered in every building. The stranger spoke, but he did not shout. His voice was calm and cold. He said that mortals were a mistake. He said he was the cure. Flash arrived on the scene next to Batman on the ground. He asked what was happening. Batman did not answer. He was analyzing the enemy. There was no data, no match in any computer. This was an invasion from a place that should not exist. The stranger in the sky pointed a finger at the falling watchtower. A small ball of black and red energy shot out. It hit the station. There was no explosion. The station just vanished. It was erased from existence. Dust and light were all that remained. Superman stared in horror. He realized this was not a fight. It was an execution. The panic started when the first building collapsed. It did not fall because of a bomb. It fell because the gravity around it crushed the foundation. The stranger's mere presence was heavy. It pressed down on the city. Birds fell out of the sky. The silence broke. Sirens wailed. People ran. They did not know where to run. The danger was everywhere. It was in the air itself. On the dark side of the moon, sensors picked up the disturbance. In Atlantis, the water pressure shifted. On Themyscira, the oracles screamed in pain. They felt a hole opening in the universe. This intruder did not belong here. The universe itself was trying to reject him, but he was too strong. He forced his way in. He stood floating above the Daily Planet globe. He looked at the frantic humans below. He saw their fear. He did not enjoy it. He judged it. To him, their fear was proof of their weakness. It was proof they did not deserve the gift of life. He prepared his next attack. He wanted to make a statement. He wanted the protectors of this world to know their time was over. He gathered energy in his palm. The light was blinding. It cast long, sharp shadows across the doom-struck city. The timeline had shifted. The gods of this world were asleep, and a new god had arrived to wake them up with fire. This was the beginning of the end. The Zero Mortals plan had come to the DC universe. The smoke from the vaporized watchtower hung in the upper atmosphere like a gray shroud blocking the midday sun over Metropolis. Superman hovered at eye level with the intruder, his cape snapping violently in the wind, generated by the stranger's sheer presence. The Man of Steel had faced gods, monsters, and interdimensional conquerors, but the entity floating before him felt distinct. There was no rage in the stranger's posture, only a terrifying stillness. The energy radiating from him was not heat or radiation, but a dense, suffocating pressure that triggered a primal fear response in every living thing within 100 miles. Superman spoke first, his voice projected to carry over the screaming sirens below, asking the stranger to stand down and explain his actions. The stranger tilted his head, the single green earring swinging gently. He looked at Superman not as an equal, but as a biologist looks at a diseased specimen under a microscope. When he spoke, the language was audible to everyone, bypassing linguistic barriers as if he were speaking directly into their minds. He called himself Goku Black, but the name meant nothing to the heroes of this world. He declared that this world was beautiful, but infested, and he had come to correct the mistake of creation. Superman tightened his fists, the air cracking around his knuckles, and told Black that he would not ask again. Black smiled, a cold expression that did not reach his eyes, and vanished. He did not fly in the way Kryptonians understood flight. He simply ceased to exist in one point of space and appeared instantly in another. Superman felt the impact before his brain registered the movement. A knee drove into his stomach with the force of a colliding asteroid. The Man of Steel doubled over, air forced from his diamond-hard lungs, his eyes widening in shock. The blow carried a strange, vibrating energy that bypassed his bioelectric aura and rattled his internal organs. Superman plummeted, smashing through the spire of the LexCorp tower, glass and steel raining down onto the streets below. He caught himself midair, shaking off the disorientation, but Black was already there. The stranger moved with a martial fluidity that Superman had rarely encountered, a perfect economy of motion that wasted no energy. Black kicked Superman in the jaw, sending him spiraling upward, then teleported above him to hammer a double-fisted strike into Superman's back. The impact created a shockwave that shattered windows for 10 blocks. Superman hit the pavement of Centennial Park, creating a crater 50 feet deep. The earth groaned, fissures spreading out like spiderwebs into the surrounding streets. Batman, watching from a rooftop 2 miles away, analyzed the data streaming into his cowl. The energy output from the stranger was spiking with every blow, but it was controlled. Unlike Doomsday, who was a force of nature, or Darkseid, who was raw power, this enemy was a technician. He was using a fighting style that maximized damage while conserving stamina. Batman tapped his comms, ordering the evacuation of Midtown and calling for immediate backup from all Reserve League members. Flash was already a blur of red and gold, moving civilians out of the collapse zones, but he was struggling. The air was so thick with the stranger's pressure that the Speed Force felt sluggish, like running through deep water. Flash stopped for a microsecond to look at the crater, his heart hammering against his ribs. He had never seen Superman manhandled so effortlessly in the opening seconds of a fight. From the crater, a beam of red heat vision erupted, targeting the figure in the sky. Black did not dodge. He swatted the laser away with the back of his hand as if it were a physical object. The heat vision deflected, slicing through an empty office building, causing the top half to slide off and crash into the street. Superman rose from the debris, his uniform torn, a bruise forming on his cheek. He was not just hurt, he was confused. His invulnerability usually negated kinetic impacts, but this enemy's strikes carried a piercing quality that felt like magic. Superman launched himself upward again, breaking the sound barrier, deciding to close the distance and grapple. He needed to restrict the stranger's movement. He grabbed Black by the shoulders, intending to fly him into orbit, away from the civilians. Black let him. As they ascended past the cloud layer, Black chuckled. A violet aura flared around him, jagged and malevolent. He expanded his energy outward. The shockwave broke Superman's grip and sent the Man of Steel tumbling through the mesosphere. Black extended his hand, fingers splayed. 5 small spheres of yellow energy formed at his fingertips and fired like machine gun rounds. They tracked Superman, slamming into his chest and shoulders. Each explosion burned with the heat of a small sun. Superman cried out, the pain searing through his nervous system, and fell back toward Earth, crashing into the bay near Metropolis harbor. The water erupted in a geyser of steam and mud. Wonder Woman arrived then, dropping from the sky like a spear. She landed on a rooftop near the harbor, her shield raised, the sword of Athena in her hand. She had sensed the disturbance from Themyscira, a rupture in the divine order. This enemy felt like a god, but one twisted by a singular, dark purpose. Aquaman rose from the harbor waters, riding a tidal wave he summoned to cushion the burning debris falling from the sky. Green Lantern Hal Jordan descended from space, his ring glowing bright emerald, followed closely by Cyborg, whose systems were glitching as they tried to interpret the foreign energy signature. The Justice League stood assembled, forming a perimeter around the bay where Superman was recovering. Black descended slowly, hovering 50 feet above the water, looking at the gathering heroes with amusement. He remarked that it was touching to see the mortals band together, like insects, swarming to protect a hive. Wonder Woman stepped forward, her voice commanding. She demanded to know what pantheon he hailed from and why he sought war. Black looked at her, sensing the divine energy in her blood. He acknowledged her heritage but called it wasted. He spoke of the Zero Mortals Plan, a term that sent a chill through the team. He explained that gods were forbidden from interfering with the natural development of mortals, but mortals had used their free will only to create chaos and suffering. Therefore, he had taken on the burden of the gods. He would purify the universe by removing the source of the chaos, intelligent life itself. Hal Jordan had heard enough. He raised his ring, constructing a massive green minigun, and opened fire. The construct bullets were made of pure willpower, capable of punching through starship hulls. Black did not move. The green energy rounds hit his aura and dissolved into harmless sparks. He didn't even blink. He looked at the ring, unimpressed by the crude manifestation of will. With a flicker of movement, he appeared in front of Hal. Before the lantern could react, Black formed a blade of violet energy around his right hand. The violent, fierce god, Slicer. He slashed horizontally. Hal's construct shield shattered like glass. The energy blade sliced across the Green Lantern's chest armor, searing the flesh underneath and overloading the ring's safety protocols. Hal screamed and fell from the sky, his light flickering out. Wonder Woman intercepted Black instantly, her sword clashing against his energy blade. The impact created a shockwave that flattened the water in the bay for a mile. Sparks flew as divine metal met divine ki. Diana was fast, her warrior training allowing her to parry Black's strikes, but she could feel the weight behind every blow. He was stronger than Hercules and faster than Hermes. They traded blows in a blur of motion, the sound of their collision echoing like thunderclaps. Black complimented her technique, noting she was the first mortal to offer him legitimate amusement. He increased his output. The violet aura spiked, turning into a towering flame. He swung his blade harder, shattering Diana's defense and kicking her into the side of a cargo ship. The steel hull crumpled around her. Cyborg unleashed his sonic cannon, a white noise blast designed to disrupt equilibrium. Black turned his glare toward the machine man. He extended a hand and clenched his fist. Cyborg's internal reactor destabilized. Victor Stone collapsed, his system screaming warnings of critical failure as the foreign energy interfered with his mother box technology. Black was systematically dismantling the team, exposing the gaps in their coordination. He was not just overpowering them, he was outclassing them. Aquaman commanded the ocean to rise, sending 1,000 tons of water crashing down on Black. The Saiyan simply flared his aura, vaporizing the water instantly, creating a cloud of superheated steam that scalded the area. From the steam, Superman returned. He was bruised and angry. He flew at full speed, breaking the sound barrier multiple times in a split second, landing a solid cross to Black's face. The stranger's head snapped back. For the first time, he had been hit. The League rallied. Wonder Woman leaped from the wreckage of the ship, lassoing Black's arm. Flash began running circles around him, siphoning speed and throwing lightning. Aquaman thrust his trident. For a moment, it seemed the combined might of Earth's greatest heroes had pinned the intruder. Black laughed. The sound was low and guttural. He straightened his neck, ignoring the lasso tightening around his arm. He looked at Superman, wiping a small drop of blood from his lip. He stared at the blood on his glove with fascination. He said that this pain was good. It would make him stronger. This body, he explained, was a gift, and every time it was damaged, it adapted. He clenched his fists and screamed. The sky turned purple. A pillar of dark energy erupted from his body, blowing the League away like dry leaves. The lasso snapped. Flash was thrown into a building 3 blocks away. Superman and Wonder Woman dug their heels into the ground, sliding back hundreds of feet. The energy output was rising exponentially. Black's hair stood up, glowing with a rosier hue. He had transformed. Super Saiyan Rosé. The beauty of the form was terrifying. He looked majestic and lethal. He told them they should be honored to witness this form, a pinnacle of divine evolution that they could never comprehend. He raised both hands high into the air. The energy of the atmosphere began to swirl. Dark clouds gathered, swirling with pink lightning. A massive sphere of energy began to form, black at the core and glowing purple on the edges. It grew rapidly, quickly dwarfing the buildings below. It was the size of a stadium, then a mountain. The pressure crushed the pavement of Metropolis. Cars flattened under their own weight. The air became unbreathable. Superman looked at the attack and realized it wasn't meant for them. It was meant for the city. It was a planet-cracking attack, scaled down just enough to maximize suffering without destroying the world he intended to claim. Black announced the start of the human extinction event. He threw the sphere. Superman screamed for everyone to get behind him. He flew directly into the path of the energy ball, bracing himself. Wonder Woman joined him, crossing her bracelets. Green Lantern, barely conscious, erected the thickest wall he could manage. Aquaman and Cyborg added their power to the shield. The sphere hit them. The noise was absolute. It was a roaring silence that drowned out all thought. The heat was beyond measurement. Superman felt his skin blistering. He pushed against the energy with everything he had, his muscles tearing, his solar reserves draining rapidly. Wonder Woman cried out as the heat began to bypass her divine durability. The ground beneath them vaporized. The sphere pushed them down, grinding them into the bedrock. They were holding it back, but only barely. The edges of the blast leaked around them, incinerating the harbor district. Skyscrapers melted like wax. The shockwave leveled everything within a 5-mile radius. The struggle lasted for 10 seconds that felt like an eternity. With a final, desperate exertion, Superman disrupted the core of the sphere with a focused burst of heat vision. The sphere detonated prematurely. The explosion engulfed the city in blinding light. When the light faded, the silence returned. A crater 3 miles wide sat where the Metropolis harbor and financial district had been. The ocean rushed in to fill the void. The Justice League lay scattered around the rim of the crater, broken and exhausted. Superman pulled himself out of the rubble, his suit in tatters, his body smoking. He looked around for Black. The enemy was high in the sky, completely unharmed, arms crossed. He looked down at the devastation with a critical eye. He noted that they had managed to save the majority of the population by absorbing the impact. He called it a noble but futile gesture. He told them that this was only the first test, and they had barely passed. He pointed a finger at Superman. He said that he would let them live for now, so they could watch their world die slowly. He wanted them to feel their helplessness. He wanted them to understand that their resistance only prolonged the inevitable suffering of their people. Black turned his back on them and flew north, toward the solitude of the Arctic, seeking a place to establish his new temple. He left the Justice League beaten in the ruins of their greatest city. The psychological blow was heavier than the physical one. They had hit him with their best, and he had treated it like a warm-up. Superman fell to his knees, coughing up blood. Batman emerged from the shadows of a ruined building, limping, his suit sparked and torn. He looked at the crater, then at the retreating figure of Goku Black. He realized that standard escalation protocols would not work. This was not a villain they could punch into submission. This was a force that defied their understanding of physics and biology. Flash zoomed in, vibrating uncontrollably. Terrified. He asked what they were going to do. Superman didn't answer immediately. He looked at the devastation, hearing the cries of the wounded starting to rise from the edges of the destruction. He realized that the rules of engagement had changed. They were not fighting a criminal. They were fighting an ideology that had the power to back up its claims. The timeline had not just been altered, it had been severed from its intended path. The Age of Heroes was ending, and the Age of Black had begun. In the Fortress of Solitude, the crystals reacted to the approach of the new god. The defense systems activated, but Black walked through the laser fields as if they were mist. He entered the central chamber, looking at the statues of Krypton. He sneered at the legacy of a dead race. He sat on a crystalline structure, adopting a meditative pose. He closed his eyes, reaching out with his senses to encompass the entire planet. He could feel every life force, every hero, every villain. He smiled. There were others on this world with potential, other sources of chaos. He would purge them all in due time. But first, he needed to acclimate to this universe's specific frequency. He needed to make this reality his own. He began to power up, a low hum that shook the ice shelf for hundreds of miles. The invasion was over. The occupation had started. 72 hours after the destruction of downtown Metropolis, the world had changed. It was not a slow change. It was instant and violent. The panic did not stop. It grew like a virus. Governments declared martial law. Borders were closed. The internet was flooded with videos of the fight. Everyone saw the Man in Black defeat the Justice League. Everyone saw the God of Steel bleed. The illusion of safety was gone. In the Batcave, the air was cold and smelled of antiseptic. Bruce Wayne sat in front of the massive computer console. He was not wearing his cowl. His chest was wrapped in bandages. His ribs were broken. His left arm was in a sling. He stared at the satellite feed of the Arctic. The Fortress of Solitude was glowing with a strange pink light. The alien intruder had taken Superman's home. He had made it his throne. Clark Kent lay on a medical table under concentrated yellow sun lamps. He was pale. His breathing was shallow. The energy Black used had lingered in his cells. It was acting like a poison. It stopped his body from absorbing sunlight efficiently. Diana stood next to him. Her arm was in a cast. Her sword was chipped. She looked tired. For the first time in centuries, the Amazon princess felt old. She told Bruce that the enemy was not just a warrior. He was a zealot. He believed he was right. That made him more dangerous than any monster. Monsters just wanted to destroy. Black wanted to fix things. And his version of fixing meant killing everyone. Bruce typed on the keyboard with his one good hand. He said they needed to know the enemy's limits. Every being had a limit. They just had to find it before everyone was dead. While the heroes licked their wounds, the villains of the world saw an opportunity. In the Hall of Doom, nestled in the swamps of Louisiana, Lex Luthor watched the same footage. He did not see a god. He saw a power source. He saw a challenge. Luthor believed that Superman was weak because he had human morals. This new alien had no such weakness. Luthor gathered his inner circle. Cheetah, Black Manta, Sinestro, Gorilla Grodd. He told them that the Justice League had failed. It was time for the true powers of Earth to step in. He believed he could reason with Black. He believed he could offer him a deal. They would help him rule. Luthor was arrogant. He thought his intellect could bridge the gap between a mortal and a deity. It was a fatal miscalculation. The Legion of Doom mobilized. They did not go to fight. They went to negotiate. They took a stealth cruiser to the Arctic. They approached the glowing fortress. The ice around the structure had melted into a slushy lake. Black stood on the balcony of the Crystal Palace. He was drinking tea. The cup was made of ice he had shaped with his energy. He watched the villain's ship land. He did not attack. He was curious. He wanted to see what the rats of this world had to say. Luthor walked out of the ship wearing his war suit. He held his hands up in a gesture of peace. He called out to Black. He praised Black's power. He said that the Justice League was a disease that kept humanity weak. He said that he and his associates shared Black's vision of a new order. Black floated down. He landed softly on the snow. He looked at Luthor. Then he looked at Cheetah and the others. He smiled that same cold smile. He asked Luthor if he was a god. Luthor frowned. He said he was something better. He was a man who had conquered his limits. Black laughed. The sound echoed off the mountains. He said that mortals praising themselves was the ugliest sound in the universe. He walked closer to Luthor. The sensors in Luthor's suit went crazy. The energy reading was off the charts. Black said that he did not want to rule. Ruling implied that the subjects were worth keeping. He wanted to cleanse. He looked at Cheetah. She hissed and lunged at him, moving faster than the eye could follow. She was a demigod in her own right, blessed by a dark god. Her claws struck Black's neck. They shattered on impact. Black did not even flinch. He grabbed Cheetah by the throat. He lifted her up. He said that a beast pretending to be a god was an insult to the divine. He squeezed. There was a sickening crunch. He dropped her body in the snow. The other villains froze. They had seen death before. But this was casual. It was effortless. Luthor powered up his suit. He fired a blast of kryptonite energy. The green beam hit Black's chest. Black looked down at the green smoke. He brushed it off. He told Luthor that this energy might hurt a Kryptonian, but he was something else. He was Zamasu in the body of a Saiyan. He was beyond their rock-paper-scissors logic. He raised his hand. A blade of energy formed. He slashed the air. The Legion's ship behind them was sliced in half. It exploded. The shockwave knocked the villains down. Black decided to make an example. He moved through the group. He broke Sinestro's ring with his bare hands. He tore the power pack off Black Manta's suit. He did not kill them all. He wanted witnesses. He grabbed Luthor by the neck of his armor and lifted him into the air. He peered through the cracked faceplate. He told Luthor to go back to the world, to tell them that their sins had summoned him, to tell them that judgment was not coming. It was here. He threw Luthor miles away. The billionaire crashed into a snowbank. His suit ruined, his pride shattered. Black turned back to the fortress. He had seen enough of Earth's so-called power. It was time to accelerate the plan. In the Batcave, the alarm screamed. Sensors detected a massive energy spike in the Arctic. It was not an explosion. It was a signal. Black was projecting his energy into the ionosphere. The sky all over the world began to change color. It turned a sickly violet. Clouds swirled into unnatural shapes. Lightning danced across the globe, but there was no thunder. Just a low, humming sound that everyone could feel in their teeth. People ran into their homes. They locked their doors. But doors could not stop this. Black's voice boomed from the sky. He did not use speakers. He used telepathy forged into the minds of 7 billion people. He told them to look up. He told them that their time of ignorance was over. He said he had given them a chance to live in peace, but they chose violence. They built weapons. They drew borders. They let the weak suffer, while the strong grew fat. He said he would take away their toys. Above every major military base in the world, a rift opened in the sky. Above the Pentagon, above the Kremlin, above the hidden missile silos in China, above the naval fleets in the Pacific. From these rifts, energy rained down. It looked like needles of pink light, thousands of them. They were precise. They did not hit houses. They did not hit schools. They hit weapons. They hit fuel depots. They hit communication hubs. The Justice League tried to act. Flash ran to the nearest naval base. He saw the needles falling. He tried to catch them. He moved at light speed, snatching the energy bolts out of the air. But there were too many. Every time he touched one, it burned his hands. The energy was corrosive. It ate through his protective aura. He screamed as a needle slipped past him and struck a nuclear submarine. The sub did not explode. It dissolved. The metal turned into dust. The nuclear reactor core was exposed and began to melt down. Flash had to run to save the sailors carrying them to shore one by one. He watched as the pride of the Navy sank into the boiling water. He felt helpless. He could save people, but he could not save the world's defense. In Gotham, Batman watched the screens go dark one by one. The global surveillance network was being blinded. Satellites were burning up in orbit. The world was going blind. Black was taking away their eyes. Without communication, panic would turn into chaos. Neighbors would turn on neighbors. Batman realized this was not just an attack. It was a social experiment. Black wanted to prove that humans were savages. If he took away their order, they would destroy themselves. And he was right. Reports started coming in over the emergency shortwave radios. Riots had started in London. Looting in Tokyo. People thought the end of the world was here, so they stopped following the rules. In the chaos of the blackout, fires started. Emergency services were overwhelmed. The hospitals were running on generators, but the fuel was low. Superman tried to sit up. He heard the chaos with his super hearing. He heard the gunshots. He heard the screams. He tried to stand, but his legs gave out. Diana caught him. She told him he was not ready. He said he had to go. She told him that if he went now, he would die. And if he died, hope died with him. She forced him back down. It was the hardest thing she ever had to do, to keep Superman from saving people. But she knew this was a war of attrition. They needed a strategy. Suddenly the attack shifted. The rain of needles stopped. The sky cleared for a moment. Then a single massive beam of energy shot up from the Arctic. It hit the moon. The moon did not blow up, but a massive glyph appeared on its surface. It was a burning mark visible from Earth. It was the mark of the Kai, a symbol of divine authority. Black was claiming the moon. He was turning it into a focal point for his energy. From the moon, a pulse was sent down. It was an EMP wave, but magic-based. It swept across the Earth in seconds. Every electronic device that was not shielded by lead or magic simply turned off. Cars stopped on the highways. Planes fell out of the sky. Hospitals went dark. The internet was gone. The modern world ended in a single heartbeat. The silence that followed was terrifying. No engines, no hum of electricity. Just the wind and the screaming. The darkness was total. Only the fires burning in the cities provided light. In the fortress, Black stood with his eyes closed. He felt the fear rising like smoke. He savored it. He was not rushing. He wanted them to sit in the darkness. He wanted them to realize how fragile they were. He spoke to the empty room. He said that now the mortals were stripped of their arrogance. They were naked in the cold. Batman lit an oil lamp in the Batcave. The computer was dead. He pulled out a map made of paper. He pulled out old radios that used vacuum tubes. He had prepared for this. He always prepared. But the scale was worse than his simulations. He looked at Wonder Woman and the crippled Superman. He said they had to move. The Batcave was compromised. If Black could see everything, he knew where they were. They needed a bunker that did not exist on any map. They moved Superman into the Batmobile, which had been modified with analog controls for this exact scenario. Cyborg was in a coma, his systems completely fried by the EMP. Aquaman carried him. They left the cave. They drove into the dark ruins of Gotham. The city was on fire. Gangs were already roaming the streets, breaking into stores not for money, but for food and water. The veneer of civilization had lasted less than 4 hours. As they crossed the bridge out of Gotham, they saw a figure standing on the suspension cables. It was not Black. It was a human, a man in a suit. He was holding a sign. The sign said, "Praise him." The man jumped off the bridge. He was the first of the cultists. The cult of Black was born that night. Weak-minded people who saw his power and decided to worship the Destroyer rather than fight him. They reached the safe house deep in the woods. It was a lead-lined bunker from the Cold War. Inside, they found Green Lantern Alan Scott, the original Lantern. His ring was powered by magic, not science, so it still worked. He was holding the line, keeping a protective bubble around the safe house. He looked at the broken team. He asked where the rest of them were. Batman didn't answer. There was no rest of them. The Titans were missing. The Suicide Squad had been executed by Black in their prison cells. The world was shrinking. In the Arctic, Black stepped out of the fortress. He floated up into the night sky. He looked at the dark planet below. He saw the pockets of fire. He saw the fear. He raised his hand. He began to gather energy again. But this time it was pink and swirling with dark spirits. He was not attacking the ground. He was opening a door. He sliced the air itself. A tear in reality opened. It was a portal to the timeline he came from. He was calling for backup. Not an army, just himself. From the portal, another figure stepped out. He looked exactly like Black, but he was green-skinned and wore the robes of a Supreme Kai. It was Zamasu, the immortal version from the alternate timeline. They stood together in the sky above the broken DC universe. Black smiled. He told Zamasu that the soil was tilled. The weeds were pulled. It was time to plant the seeds of their utopia. Zamasu looked at the burning world with disgust. He said it reeked of mortal sin. He said they should flood it. Black shook his head. He said suffering was part of the cure. They needed to suffer so they would understand why they had to die. The two gods descended toward Metropolis. They landed in the crater where the city center used to be. They stood back to back. They raised their hands. A barrier of light expanded from them. It pushed the ocean back. It cleared the rubble. In seconds, they built a palace of energy. A dark cathedral rising from the ashes of Superman's city. It was a mockery of the Hall of Justice. It was the Temple of Zero. The catastrophe was complete. The world's military was gone. The grid was down. The heroes were in hiding. And now the enemy had doubled. There were two of them. One who could not be killed, and one who grew stronger with every fight. In the bunker, Batman slammed his fist onto the table. It was the only time he showed emotion. He looked at the flickering candlelight. He said they had been fighting the wrong way. They tried to overpower power. You can't overpower infinity. They had to change the rules. They needed magic. They needed the one person who dealt with heaven and hell. They needed John Constantine. But Constantine was lost in the chaos. Superman opened his eyes. They were glowing faintly red. The rest helped him restore some energy. He whispered. He said he could hear the heartbeat of the earth. It was slowing down. The planet itself was dying under the pressure of the Dark Key. If they didn't stop this soon, there would be no Earth left to save. The door to the bunker knocked. It was a rhythmic knock. Batman drew a batarang. Wonder Woman raised her sword. The door opened slowly. It was not an enemy. It was Lex Luthor. He was freezing. His face was bloody. He dragged a metal case behind him. He collapsed on the floor. He looked up at Superman. He wheezed. He said he had a plan. He said he knew how to hurt them. But it would cost them everything. Superman looked at his greatest enemy. In the flickering light, Luthor didn't look like a villain. He looked like a desperate man at the end of the world. Batman lowered his weapon. The enemy of my enemy was the only friend left. In the darkness, a desperate, unholy alliance was formed. The war for reality had just become a guerrilla war, and the DC universe was the jungle. Lex Luthor popped the latches on the lead case. The sound was loud in the silent bunker. Inside sat a jagged piece of crystal. It was not kryptonite. It was a shard of the Fortress of Solitude that Luthor had recovered from the blast zone. It pulsed with a faint violet rhythm. Luthor explained that he had analyzed the radiation. It was not just energy. It was a frequency. A song of subatomic particles that rewrote the laws of physics around it. He called it Divine Key. He looked at Batman and Wonder Woman. He said that science could not stop it because science relied on constants. This energy treated constants as suggestions. To fight a god, they needed a frequency that could disrupt the divine signal. They needed magic, but not just any magic. They needed the raw, chaotic power of the Rock of Eternity. They needed the boy. Batman looked at the map. Fawcett City was deep in the red zone. The cult of Black had turned it into a pilgrimage site. They believed the lightning of Shazam was a precursor to Black's arrival. Billy Batson had not been seen since the invasion began. If the boy was dead, their best hope was gone. Wonder Woman touched her lasso. She felt a phantom pain in her side where her ribs were knitting together. She said that even if they found the champion, the sky belonged to the enemy. Calling down the lightning would be like sending up a flare. Luthor countered that it was a risk they had to take. He had built a device, a harmonic dampener, that could mask the magical signature for exactly 3 seconds. That was all the time Billy would need to transform and transfer his power into the dampener. Luthor wanted to weaponize the living lightning. He wanted to turn it into a bomb. While they argued, the war outside escalated. In the Atlantic Ocean, Aquaman was fighting a losing battle. He had returned to Atlantis to raise the planetary shields, but Zamasu was there waiting. The immortal god did not fight like Black. He did not care about pain. He swam through the pressure of the deep ocean without a suit. Aquaman commanded the Krakens. The massive beasts lashed out with tentacles thick as skyscrapers. Zamasu let them strike him. He smiled as he was crushed. Then he exploded outward. His body reformed instantly. He drew a blade of ki and sliced the beasts into sushi. He descended on the capital city. He did not destroy the buildings. He poisoned the water. He released his dark energy into the currents. Atlanteans began to choke. Their gills burned. The water turned purple. Aquaman screamed in rage and drove his trident through Zamasu's chest, pinning him to the throne room floor. Zamasu looked at the trident sticking out of his heart and laughed. He slid his body up the shaft of the weapon, pulling himself closer to the king of the seas. He whispered that a king who cannot save his people is nothing. He blasted Aquaman through the roof of the palace. Atlantis fell into silence. The oceans of Earth were now hostile territory. In the bunker, Superman was struggling. The solar lamps were not enough. His cells were fighting a war on a microscopic level. The poison in his blood was trying to rewrite his DNA. He heard Aquaman's defeat. The psychic scream of the ocean reached him. He tried to stand up. Batman pushed him back down. He told Clark that if he went out there now, He would just be another body for them to bury. Superman grabbed Batman's collar. His eyes burned red. He asked how many more had to die while they made plans. Batman did not blink. He said all of them. All of them had to die if it meant winning the war. Superman let go. He slumped back. He hated the logic, but he knew the truth. He was the nuclear option. You do not fire the nuke until you are sure it will hit. The team split up. It was a tactical necessity. Martian Manhunter and Flash would create a diversion in Central City, drawing the attention of the Shadows, the autonomous energy clones Black had started releasing to police the population. Batman, Wonder Woman, and Luthor boarded the Batwing. They flew low, hugging the terrain to avoid the needle rain that still fell sporadically from the rifts. They approached Fawcett City. The city was dark, but the central square was lit by bonfires. Thousands of people were chanting. In the center of the square was a cage. Inside sat a young boy. Billy Batson looked small. He was bruised. The cultists had beaten him, trying to force him to call the lightning so they could steal it. But Billy had refused. He knew that if he transformed, Black would find him. Batman ejected from the plane, gliding down into the shadows. Wonder Woman dropped straight into the crowd. She did not use her sword. She used her shield, bashing through the fanatics. She was holding back. She did not want to kill civilians, even if they were brainwashed. Luthor stayed in the hovering jet, readying the dampener. The extraction went wrong immediately. The cultists were not just humans anymore. Some of them had been touched by Black's energy. Their eyes glowed purple. They moved with hysterical strength. They swarmed Wonder Woman, grabbing her limbs, piling on top of her. She threw them off, shattering bones, but they kept coming. They did not feel pain. They only felt devotion. Batman reached the cage. He used a laser cutter on the lock. He grabbed Billy. The boy was catatonic. He kept muttering that the wizard was dead, that the doors were closed. Batman shook him. He told him that he did not need a wizard. He needed to be a hero. He dragged the boy toward the extraction point. Suddenly, the fires in the square went out. The chanting stopped. The air pressure dropped. A figure floated down from the clouds. It was not Black. It was Zamasu. He had finished with Atlantis. He looked fresh. His clothes were spotless. He looked at Batman and the boy. He tutted. He said that kidnapping children was beneath the dignity of the Dark Knight. Wonder Woman broke free from the mob. She leaped at Zamasu. She was faster than Aquaman. She was a better warrior. She feinted low and slashed high, taking Zamasu's head off in one clean stroke. The head rolled onto the pavement. The body stood still. Batman did not stop. He knew too much about magic to trust a kill like that. He threw a smoke grenade and grappled up a building, pulling Billy with him. Below them, Zamasu's body picked up its head. The neck stump turned into purple smoke and reconnected. Zamasu cracked his neck. He looked bored. He fired a beam of energy at the building. The entire structure collapsed into dust. Batman and Billy fell. Wonder Woman caught them mid-air, shielding them with her body as they crashed into the street. Luthor saw the data on his screen. The energy signature of the green one was impossible. It looped. It had no end. Immortality. A true, unkillable object. Luthor realized his calculations were wrong. You could not subtract from infinity. He yelled over the comms to abort. But it was too late. Black arrived. He did not float down. He burst from the Speed Force. He had been chasing Flash. He held the Flash's helmet in his hand. It was crushed. There was blood on it. He dropped the helmet in front of Batman. He said the runner was fast, but he was linear. Black could step outside of time. He looked at Billy Batson. He sensed the power inside the boy. Ancient magic. The power of old gods. Black smiled. He said he would add that power to his collection. He reached for the boy. Billy Batson looked at the crushed helmet of the Flash. He looked at Batman's torn suit. He looked at Wonder Woman bleeding from a dozen wounds. The fear in his eyes turned into something else. It turned into the cold resolve of a child who realizes the adults cannot save him. He stood up. He looked at the sky. The violet clouds swirled. He screamed the word, Shazam! The lightning did not come from the Rock of Eternity. It tried to punch through the barrier Black had erected around the world. The bolt that came down was not white. It was black and jagged. It was corrupted by the atmosphere. It hit Billy. He screamed. It did not transform him cleanly. It twisted him. He grew, but his muscles were wrong. His suit was gray. His eyes were blank. The power of the gods had been filtered through the power of a demon. The corrupted Captain Marvel lunged at Black. The speed was incredible. For a second, Black was caught off guard. The boy hammered him into the pavement. The ground shattered for miles. Black lay in the crater. He laughed. He blasted the corrupted Marvel off him. He stood up, brushing dust from his shoulder. He said that was interesting. The magic of this world was potent, but it was brittle. He drew his energy blade. It was time to end the experiment. He moved to decapitate the boy. Wonder Woman intercepted. She caught the blade on her bracelets. The divine metal sparked. She screamed, pushing back against the force that could crack planets. Her boots plowed furrows in the concrete. She yelled for Batman to get the boy out. Batman activated the Batwing's remote protocol. The jet slammed into the square, firing every missile it had. The explosion was massive but useless. It just created cover. Batman grabbed the corrupted, sprawling Marvel and grappled away into the sewers. Luthor provided covering fire from a satellite weapon he had hacked. Pillars of light struck the square, blinding the gods for a moment. They escaped, but they left Diana behind. Wonder Woman stood alone against two gods. She knew she was not walking away. She took off her bracelets. Her power surged unbound. Her eyes glowed white. She became the avatar of war. She fought with a ferocity that shook the foundations of the city. She cut Zamasu into pieces again and again. She managed to stab Black through the shoulder. But it was a war of attrition she could not win. Black tired of the game. He combined his energy with Zamasu. They formed a massive sphere of holy wrath. They fired at point blank. Diana blocked it. Her shield disintegrated. Her armor melted. She was consumed by the light. When the light faded, she was gone. Only a scorch mark remained. In the sewers, Batman dragged the unconscious, de-transformed Billy. He stopped. He felt it. The silence. The loss. He didn't cry. He didn't scream. He just tightened his grip on the boy's shirt. He kept moving. The cost of the mission was the greatest warrior on Earth, and all they had was a broken child and a shard of data. Back in the bunker, the mood was funereal. Superman was awake. He was standing. He was not healed, but he was mobile. He stared at the empty spot where Diana used to stand. He did not say a word. The air around him grew hot. His heat vision was leaking from his eyes uncontrolled. He was vibrating with a rage that terrified Luthor. Luthor backed away. He said they had the boy. They could try to purify the lightning. Superman turned to look at Luthor. His eyes were two pits of fire. He said he didn't care about the lightning. He wanted to kill them. He wanted to tear them apart, atom by atom. Batman stepped in. He looked small next to the grieving alien. He told Clark that rage was what they wanted. Rage made you sloppy. Diana died so they could have a chance. If he wasted it on a suicide run, her death meant nothing. Superman clenched his fists until his palms bled. He took a deep breath. The heat subsided, but the anger remained cold and hard. Luthor hooked Billy up to the machine. He used the crystal shard to filter the energy. He explained his theory. Zamasu was immortal in time. Black was invincible in power. But they were linked. They shared a Kai signature. If they could disrupt that link, they might make Zamasu vulnerable, or black mortal. They needed to inject a virus into their energy stream. The virus was the magic. But not just magic. It had to be the antithesis of their order. It had to be the death of gods. They needed the Black Racer, the new god of death. The plan shifted. It was no longer about a bomb. It was about a summoning. They had to use the corrupted lightning to call the death that chases speedsters. Since Flash was missing and presumed dead, the Speed Force was unguarded. If they could lure Black into the Speed Force, they could sick the Black Racer on him. It was a desperate, insane plan. It risked destroying time itself. But they had no other cards to play. Meanwhile, in the Temple of Zero, Black and Zamasu sat on their thrones. They felt the death of Wonder Woman. It tasted sweet, a warrior's soul. Zamasu commented that the mortals were persistent. Black looked at the cut on his shoulder. It had already healed, but the memory of the pain lingered. He frowned. He felt something shifting in the universe. The balance was tipping. The mortals were not just fighting back. They were breaking the rules of reality to do it. He stood up. He told Zamasu to prepare the Zero Mortals plan's final stage. They would not just cleanse the surface, they would merge with the universe itself. They would become the law of physics. Black walked to the edge of the temple. He looked out at the ruin of Metropolis. He raised his hand. The rifts in the sky opened wider. From them poured not just needles, but armies. Demons from the darker timelines. Shadow monsters. The invasion was entering the occupation phase. He wanted to flush the rats out of their holes. He sensed the energy in the bunker. It was faint, masked by lead and magic, but he could taste the desperation. He smiled. He decided to let them come to him. He wanted to see what the last son of Krypton would do when he had nothing left to lose. The heroes were cornered. Their heavy hitters were dead or missing. Their magic was corrupted. Their alliance was fragile, and the enemy was preparing to ascend to a state of being that superseded existence. The chain reaction had begun. The collapse of the DC universe was accelerating. The only thing left was the final gamble. A gamble that would require Superman to break his one rule. To save the world, he would have to become a killer. And even that might not be enough. The shadows lengthened across the world as the sun set on the third day of the invasion. Night had fallen, and it promised to be eternal. The air in the bunker tasted like recycled fear and stale coffee. It was the taste of a losing war. Lex Luthor tightened the final bolt on the modification to the cosmic treadmill. The device had been salvaged from the ruins of the Flash Museum by a drone hours ago. It was battered, scorched, and covered in dust, but the internal mechanism was still intact. This was the gun. Billy Batson was the bullet. The target was the timeline itself. Luthor stood up and wiped grease from his hands onto his expensive, ruined suit. He looked at Batman. The Dark Knight was sitting in the corner, sharpening a batarang. It was a pointless gesture. A piece of metal would not hurt a god. But it gave Bruce Wayne something to do with his hands to keep them from shaking. The nerve damage in his left arm was spreading. He was losing motor control. He knew he was a liability in the field, but he was the tactician. He had to be there to call the play. Superman stood by the heavy blast door. He was not looking at them. He was listening to the world outside. He could hear the screams of the dying in Rio de Janeiro. He could hear the tectonic plates grinding together in Japan, where Black had dropped at a mountain range. The Man of Steel was vibrating. It was not fear. It was a buildup of solar energy that his body could no longer regulate. The poison from Black's initial attack had compromised his biomatrix. He was becoming a living bomb. If he pushed too hard, he would not just die, he would detonate. Luthor walked over to him. He held out a small lead syringe. He explained that this was a stabilizer. It was a cocktail of synthetic kryptonite and adrenaline. would dampen the pain and keep his cells from exploding, but it would also shut down his body's safety limiters. Once he took this, there was no going back. He would burn through his reserves in minutes. It was a suicide stim. Superman looked at the needle. He didn't hesitate. He took it and injected it directly into his neck. He threw the empty syringe on the floor. He said he didn't need minutes. He just needed 1 second to get his hands on Black's throat. The plan was simple and desperate. They would use the treadmill to tear open the Speed Force. Without a speedster to guide it, the rift would be a jagged wound in reality. It would act as a beacon. They would amplify the signal with the death energy of the Black Lantern ring Batman had kept in a lead box since the blackest night. The combination of the Speed Force rupture and the death signal was designed to summon the Black Racer. The new god of death was an unstoppable force. It did not fight. It collected. If they could trick the Racer into locking on to Zamasu or Black, it might be the only thing in the universe capable of severing their immortality. It was like summoning a hurricane to blow out a candle. The collateral damage would be catastrophic, but the alternative was extinction. They moved out under the cover of a magical shroud woven by Alan Scott. The Green Lantern was old. His energy was flickering. He was fueling the stealth field with his own life force. He walked with a cane made of green light. He looked at the ruins of Central City. The city of Speed was now a graveyard of statues. The shadows, the mindless energy clones of Black, patrolled the streets. They did not walk. They glided. When they found a survivor, they did not kill them quickly. They turned them into energy to feed the rifts. The team moved through the sewer tunnels, dragging the heavy treadmill on a hover sled. The damp air smelled of ozone and rot. Billy Batson walked beside Batman. The boy was silent. His eyes were hard. He had seen too much. He was not a child anymore. He was a vessel for vengeance. They reached the surface in the center of the city. The Flash statue was broken, lying face down in the mud. They set up the treadmill. Luthor began the calibration. The noise was the problem. As soon as they turned it on, every sensor on the planet would see them. They had to be fast. Batman signaled Alan Scott. The Green Lantern nodded. He dropped the stealth field and flared his power. He created a massive construct, a fortress of green flame around the city square. It was a challenge. He was drawing the fire. The shadows turned as one. They shrieked, a sound like tearing metal, and swarmed the green walls. Alan Scott held the line. He poured his soul into the ring. The fire burned brighter, incinerating the first wave of shadows. But there were thousands of them. Luthor slammed the lever. The cosmic treadmill whined. Sparks flew. It needed a jump start. Billy Batson stepped onto the platform. He didn't say the word with joy. He screamed it with hate. Shazam! The black lightning struck. The corrupted magic poured into the machine. The treadmill screamed. Reality tore open. A fissure of crackling red and black energy split the air. The sound was deafening. It sounded like the universe was screaming in pain. The beacon was lit. High above in the Temple of Zero, Black stopped his meditation. He felt the rupture. He looked at Zamasu. Zamasu frowned. He felt the disturbance in the time stream. It was offensive to him, a crude violation of the temporal laws. Black stood up. He grinned. He said the rats were trying to bite. He vanished. Zamasu followed. They did not send minions. They went themselves. They arrived instantly. They appeared floating above the green fortress. Black looked down at the old Green Lantern. He raised a hand and flicked his finger. A shockwave of air pressure hit the green wall. The construct shattered. Alan Scott was thrown backward, his ring shattering into dust. He hit the ground and did not move. The first offender was gone. Superman launched himself from the ground. The stabilizer was working. He moved faster than he had in years. He didn't fly. He teleported through sheer speed. He hit Black mid-air. The impact created a vacuum that sucked the air out of the city square. Superman didn't stop. He grabbed Black by the face and drove him through the pavement, through the sewers, deep into the bedrock. Zamasu floated down toward the machine. He saw the rift. He saw the boy. He realized what they were doing. He scoffed. He called it a primitive trap. He extended his hand to erase the machine. Wonder Woman's lasso snapped around his wrist. It wasn't Diana. It was Batman. He had recovered the lasso from the site of her death. He was using a mechanized exoskeleton to amplify his strength. He wasn't strong enough to hold a god, but he was strong enough to annoy one. He jerked the rope, pulling Zamasu's aim off. The energy blast went wide, vaporizing a city block. Batman activated the electrified charge in the lasso. Millions of volts dumped into Zamasu. The god just looked at the rope with mild irritation. He flew toward Batman, dragging the Dark Knight across the broken ground. Below the earth, the fight was brutal. Superman was fighting like a brawler. He headbutted Black. He used his heat vision at point-blank range, burning the skin off Black's face. Black laughed through the injury. His skin knit back together in seconds. He kneed Superman in the stomach, rupturing the Man of Steel's spleen. Superman vomited blood, but didn't let go. He drove his thumbs into Black's eyes. Black screamed in genuine pain and exploded with energy, blasting Superman back up through the tunnel and into the sky. Black followed, his aura flaring into the rose-colored flame. He drew his energy scythe. He told Superman that his struggle was beautiful, but finite. Luthor was at the console. The readings were spiking. The rift was widening. The Black Racer was coming. He could see the silhouette in the energy stream. A skier made of death. But the targeting system was drifting. The chaos of the fight was disrupting the lock. Luthor looked at Batman being battered by Zamasu. He looked at Superman, bleeding in the sky. He made a choice. A small, cold calculation. He couldn't target Black. Black was too fast. He couldn't target Zamasu. Zamasu was immortal. He had to target the fusion of their energies. He realized that the only way to stop them was to force the universe to reject them both. He adjusted the frequency of the beacon. He didn't aim it at a person. He aimed it at the Potara earring on Black's ear. The Black Racer burst from the rift. The entity was terrifying. It was not a man. It was a concept given form. It wore armor made of the void. It rode skis of black light. It did not speak. It simply accelerated. It locked onto the signal Luthor had painted. It ignored the chaos. It ignored the dying lantern. It flew straight at Goku Black. Black saw the entity. For the first time, he felt a chill. This was not Ki. This was the end of things. He tried to teleport, but the racer was moving through the speed force. There was nowhere to go. The racer raised a scythe that made Black's energy blade look like a toy. It swung. Black dodged, but not fast enough. The scythe clipped his ear. The green Potara earring shattered. The effect was instantaneous and horrific. The earring was not just jewelry. It was a link to Zamasu. It was a divine artifact that stabilized their temporal connection. When it broke, the paradox that allowed Black, a past version of Zamasu in a stolen body from a future timeline, to exist in this specific causality began to unravel. Black screamed. His body began to glitch. One moment he was solid, the next he was a wireframe of purple energy. Zamasu felt the severing. He abandoned Batman and flew toward Black. He shouted that without the link, the time ring would reject Black. He would be erased by the paradox. The Black Racer turned. It had missed the kill, but it smelled blood. It turned its attention to Zamasu. It sensed the immortality. To the god of death, immortality was an insult. It was a cancer. The racer shrieked and charged at Zamasu. This was the moment, the turning point. If the racer touched Zamasu, the unstoppable force would meet the immovable object. The result would be a cancellation of existence. Superman saw it. He dove from the sky, tackling Black to keep him pinned, to keep him from helping his other self. "Let him die!" Superman roared, hammering Black's glitching form. Zamasu looked at the approaching death. He looked at his counterpart struggling. He realized the Zero Mortals plan was about to fail because of a technicality. He made a decision that no one expected, a decision born of pure narcissism and madness. He did not dodge the racer. He did not fight it. He reached into his own pocket and pulled out the matching Patara earring. He looked at Black. He shouted a command, "Merge, now, before the void takes you." Black, desperate and dissolving, reached out. He didn't need the earring. Zamasu threw the earring to him. It was a Hail Mary pass in the middle of an apocalypse. Superman saw the small green object flying through the air. He tried to catch it. He extended his hand. He was inches away. A laser blast from Luthor hit Superman's hand. It was a mistake. Or was it? Luthor had been aiming for the earring, but the chaotic energy threw his aim off. The blast knocked Superman's hand aside. The earring hit Black's chest. He phased through his glitching state, and the earring clipped onto his remaining ear. The Black Racer struck Zamasu at the exact moment the fusion activated. The scythe of death hit the body of the god just as the body ceased to be a singular entity. The universe did not scream this time. It went silent. The color drained from the world. Everything turned gray. The Speed Force rift didn't close. It shattered like a glass window. The sky broke into millions of mirrored shards. A blinding pillar of white light erupted from the point of impact. It engulfed the Black Racer. It engulfed Zamasu. It engulfed Black. The force of the fusion, combined with the metaphysical rejection of the Black Racer, created an explosion of soul pressure that flattened Central City completely. The heroes were blown away like dust motes. Superman was hurled into the stratosphere. Batman was buried under tons of rubble. Luthor was thrown into the river, his suit locked down to save his life. When the light faded, there was no Black Goku. There was no Zamasu. There was no Black Racer. There was a new figure hovering in the void where the city used to be. He wore the clothing of a Supreme Kai, black and gray with a red sash. His hair was white, defying gravity in a spiky halo. A halo of white plasma floated behind his back. He did not look like a monster. He looked like an angel. But his face was twisted in a mask of absolute divine arrogance. He was fused Zamasu. But something was wrong. The right side of his face was purple and slimy. His right arm was bulbous and pulsating. The Black Racer's touch had not killed him, but it had corrupted the fusion. The mortality of the Racer had been absorbed into the immortality of the god. He was now half divine, half rotting. He looked at his hand. He clenched his fist. The space around his hand cracked. He spoke. His voice was two voices layered over each other, echoing with a metallic reverb. "My form is justice. My form is the world. Revere me. Praise me. This noble and beautiful, immortal and most powerful god, Zamasu." He looked down at the ruins. He didn't fire a blast. He simply exerted his will. The rubble began to float. The dust turned into light. He was not destroying. He was rewriting. He was overriding the reality of the DC universe with his own divine will. Batman dug himself out of the debris. He was coughing blood. His exoskeleton was dead weight. He looked up at the abomination. He realized the gamble had failed. They hadn't subtracted a piece from the board. They had combined the pieces into a king, and they had given that king the power of death itself. Fused Zamasu raised his corrupted arm. The purple slime expanded. It dripped onto the ground. Where it landed, the earth didn't burn. It screamed. Faces appeared in the mud. The souls of the dead were being pulled back and fused into the planet. He was not just killing them. He was assimilating them. He was becoming the universe. Superman crashed back down to Earth, landing hard. He was spent. The stimulant had worn off. He was shivering. He looked at the enemy. He felt a despair he had never known. Doomsday was a monster. Darkseid was a tyrant. This was something else. This was a fundamental rejection of life. Luthor dragged himself onto the muddy bank of the river. He looked at his datapad. It was cracked, but still working. The energy readings were undefined. There were no numbers, just error messages. He laughed. A manic, broken laugh. He realized the irony. He had spent his life trying to prove that men were better than gods. And his final act was to help create the ultimate god. Fused Zamasu turned his gaze to the horizon. He saw the struggling pockets of resistance across the globe. He decided to end the game. He spread his arms. The halo on his back expanded. It grew until it encircled the planet. From the halo, rain began to fall. But it was not water. It was red beams of light. The light of divine justice. It struck everywhere at once. It hit the hidden bunkers. It hit the remaining cities. It hit the oceans. The narrative momentum had shifted permanently. The heroes had played their ace, and the house had simply changed the game. There was no strategy left, no clever trick. The small choice to trust the technology, the small error in aim, the small hesitation of a hero, it had all compounded into this massive outcome. The timeline was calcifying. The DC universe was becoming the Zamasu universe. Billy Batson, detransformed and broken in the rubble, looked up at the white god. He whispered for the wizard. No one answered. The magic was gone. The speed force was broken. The connection to the gods was severed. The villain had won. The only question left was not how to save the world, but how to die with dignity in a world that no longer belonged to them. The silence that followed the expansion of the halo was not peaceful. It was the silence of a grave. The red beams of the light of divine justice had stopped falling because there were no more targets. The resistance was not just broken, it was erased. The geography of Earth had changed. Continents were fractured. The oceans were evaporating, turning into thick, violet mist that smelled of ozone and rot. Above the ruined planet, fused Zamasu hovered. He was no longer looking at the ants. He was looking at the stars. His corrupted arm, the purple sludge that the black racer had infected, was throbbing. It was growing. The slime dripped from his elbow, sizzling as it hit the upper atmosphere. Each drop birthed a monster. Not the shadows from before, but twisted, agonizing things. Creatures of divine mud that crawled over the wreckage of civilization, looking for survivors to assimilate. Bruce Wayne lay half-buried under a slab of concrete that used to be part of a bank. He could not feel his legs. His suit was dead weight. He looked at the sky. It was beautiful in a horrific way. The halo of Zamasu acted like a prism, turning the sunlight into a kaleidoscope of holy fire. Bruce coughed, tasting copper. He turned his head. Lex Luthor was sitting nearby, leaning against a twisted steel girder. Luthor was staring at his hands. He was laughing softly. It was a dry, rattling sound. He muttered that he had calculated everything. He had accounted for alien physiology, for magic, for metahuman variances. But he hadn't accounted for faith. He said that Zamasu wasn't fighting with logic. He was fighting with a narrative. He believed he was the hero, and in this universe, the hero always wins. Therefore, Zamasu could not lose. Superman landed between them. He didn't make a sound. He didn't create a crater. He simply touched down. He looked terrible. His skin was gray. His veins were black, visible through the tears in his suit. The solar energy in his body was almost gone, replaced by the lingering radiation of Black's attacks. He looked at Batman. He didn't ask if they had a plan. He knew they didn't. He knelt down and lifted the concrete slab off Bruce's legs. It was a meaningless gesture. Bruce's spine was shattered. Superman looked at Luthor. He asked if the Phantom Zone projector in the fortress was still active. Luthor stopped laughing. He looked at the alien. He said the fortress was Zamasu's throne room now. Going there was suicide. Superman nodded. He said he wasn't going to the fortress. He was asking if the technology could be replicated. Luthor hesitated. He looked at the debris around them. He said he could build a localized singularity generator using the power core of his warsuit and the remnants of the cosmic treadmill. But it wouldn't send Zamasu to the Phantom Zone. The zone was a dimension. Zamasu could break dimensions. They needed to send him somewhere else. Somewhere outside. Bruce spoke. His voice was a whisper. He said the source wall, the edge of the multiverse, the place where things went when they were too dangerous to exist. If they could open a boom tube directly into the wall, Zamasu might be absorbed. He would become part of the barrier, frozen forever. Luthor shook his head. He said they needed a mother box to open a boom tube. They didn't have one. Cyborg was dead. Steppenwolf was gone. Superman stood up. He looked at the sun, hidden behind the glare of Zamasu's halo. He said they didn't need a mother box. They needed enough energy to punch a hole in the fabric of reality. He said he would be the hammer. High above, Zamasu screamed. It was not a scream of pain, but of ecstasy. The corruption on his right side was consuming him. The purple sludge covered half his face now. He realized that the mortal body of Goku Black was dying. The Black Racer's touch was absolute. But Zamasu was a genius of rationalization. He decided that this corruption was not death. It was evolution. It was the universe trying to become him. He spread his arms. He shouted that a god does not need a body. A god is the world. He began to expand. He didn't grow in size. He lost his cohesion. His physical form dissolved into mist and light. He became the atmosphere. The sky turned green. The clouds formed into thousands of copies of his face. The wind spoke with his voice. He was casting aside his mortality to become infinite Zamasu. He was overwriting the DC universe. On the ground, the pressure became unbearable. The air itself was trying to crush them. The faces in the sky looked down, laughing. Red lightning struck the ground at random. Superman looked at Luthor and Batman. He told them to build the door. He would buy them the time. He crouched. He didn't fly. He jumped. He put every ounce of his remaining strength into his legs. The ground for 5 miles shattered. Superman shot up like a bullet. He broke the sound barrier, then the light barrier. He flew straight into the green sky. He didn't attack the faces. He flew past them. He aimed for the halo. He punched through the ring of white plasma, his skin burning, and exited the atmosphere. He was in space. He turned to the sun. It was yellow and distant. He needed it, all of it. He flew toward the star. He didn't stop at the surface. He dove into the corona. The heat was unimaginable. But Superman forced his cells to open. He didn't just absorb the light. He drank the fire. He dove deep into the core of the sun. He became a conduit. He was overloading his biomatrix on purpose. He was turning himself into a living fusion bomb. The sun began to dim. It turned orange, then red. Superman was draining the solar system's battery. He screamed as his body began to tear apart at the atomic level. He was holding the energy together with sheer will. He turned back to Earth. He was a comet of blue-white fire. He was the brightest thing in the universe. On Earth, Luthor worked with the desperation of a man who knows he is already dead. He ripped the nth metal weave from Batman's belt. He wired it into the warp core of his suit. He connected it to the fractured coils of the cosmic treadmill. It was an abomination of science, a machine held together by duct tape and hope. Batman guided him. Even paralyzed, his mind was sharp. He calculated the frequency needed to pierce the source wall. He told Luthor they only had one shot. If they missed, the singularity would eat the Earth. Luthor finished the circuit. The machine hummed. It was a hungry sound. The sky screamed. The infinite Zamasu sensed the threat. The faces in the clouds turned toward the incoming comet. Thousands of mouths opened. They fired energy beams at Superman. But Superman was moving too fast. He was moving with the momentum of a dying star. He smashed into the atmosphere. The impact ignited the air. He didn't slow down. He wasn't aiming for the ground. He was aiming for the metaphysical heart of Zamasu. He flew into the center of the green mist. He released the energy. The explosion was silent because it burned the air before the sound could travel. A sphere of pure solar plasma expanded outward. It burned the green faces. It vaporized the purple slime. It was a cleansing fire. For a moment, the Zamasu universe was pushed back. The green sky tore open, revealing the black void of space. The entity shrieked. It was pain, real, searing pain. The solar energy was disrupting his Ki signature. He tried to reform, to crush the gnat that had burned him. "Now!" Batman shouted. Luthor slammed his fist onto the activation key. The machine fired. It didn't shoot a beam. It tore a hole in the world. A boom tube opened, but it was wrong. It wasn't a tunnel. It was a crack in the glass of reality. Through the crack, they could see it. The source wall. A gray, infinite barrier covered in the petrified bodies of gods and monsters who had tried to learn the ultimate secret. The suction was instant. It wasn't pulling air, it was pulling existence. Infinite Zamasu felt the drag. He looked at the crack. He saw the wall. He felt a terror he had never known. The wall was not a fighter. It was a finality. He tried to flee. He tried to shift his essence into the timeline, to hide in the past. But Superman was there. The Man of Steel was no longer a man. He was a skeleton wrapped in solar flame. He grabbed the essence of Zamasu. He couldn't touch the mist, but he could grapple the gravity of the god. He used his own mass, increased by the solar density, to act as an anchor. He dragged Zamasu down. "You want this world?" Superman's voice was a telepathic roar that shook the planet. "Then take it! Take all of it!" Superman flew toward the crack. He was dragging the sky with him. Zamasu thrashed. He fired jagged bolts of purple lightning into Superman's back. He flayed the flesh from Superman's bones. But Superman didn't let go. He was powered by the memory of Metropolis, by the death of Wonder Woman, by the silence of Atlantis. He drove the god into the singularity. They hit the event horizon together. The gravity of the source wall grabbed them. Zamasu screamed as his immortality was negated. The wall didn't care if you were immortal. It only cared if you were present. He tried to separate, to flee back to the safety of the timeline, but the corruption of the Black Racer held him fast. The death energy acted as a glue, binding him to the physical plane just enough for the wall to take hold. Zamasu's face, the giant green face in the sky, stretched. It distorted. It was sucked into the crack like smoke into a vacuum cleaner. He clawed at the edges of the rift with hands made of clouds. He begged, he bargained, he promised to leave, he promised to restore everything. But the machine didn't listen. The wall didn't listen. With a final, wet tear, the infinite Zamasu was ripped from the atmosphere of Earth. He was pulled across the dimensions. He slammed into the source wall. The impact fused him instantly. The green mist hardened into gray stone. The face of Zamasu, twisted in a scream of eternal denial, became just another relief carving on the cosmic barrier. He was trapped. Not dead. Not alive. Just stopped. A statue of a god who wanted to be everything, now forced to be nothing more than a brick in the wall of the universe. The crack snapped shut. The machine on Earth exploded, sending shrapnel slicing through Luther's armor. Luther fell back, bleeding, laughing hysterically. Batman closed his eyes. He listened. The wind was just wind. The screaming had stopped. But there was no sun. Superman fell from the sky. He was not a comet anymore. He was a small, charred thing. He crashed into the mud a few yards away from them. He didn't move. Batman dragged himself over, ignoring the agony in his spine. He reached Clark. Superman was alive, but barely. His skin was translucent. His hair was gone. His body was eating itself to stay alive. The sun was not gone, but it was dim. It was a dark red ember in the sky. Superman had drained it to the point of collapse. It would take millions of years to recover, or it would fizzle out in a decade. The Earth began to cool instantly. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in a minute. The winds picked up, howling across the frozen ruins. Luther crawled over. He looked at the dying sun. He looked at the ruined Earth. He looked at the broken hero. "We won," Luther whispered. He sounded horrified. "We won, and we killed the world." Batman looked at the horizon. The purple mist was settling, turning into a toxic frost. The light of justice had stopped, but the damage was absolute. The population was decimated. The infrastructure was gone. The ecosystem was shattered. And now, the long winter was beginning. "No," Batman rasped. He reached into his belt. He pulled out a small lead box. It wasn't kryptonite. It was a seed. A literal seed from the botanical gardens of Gotham, preserved by poison ivy before she died in the first wave. He held it in his hand. "We didn't kill it. We just reset the clock." Superman opened his eyes. They were milky white. He was blind. He reached out a trembling hand and gripped Batman's gauntlet. He couldn't speak. He didn't have the breath. But the grip was firm. It was an acknowledgement. They had done the impossible. They had killed a timeline to save the concept of existence. The snow began to fall. It was gray snow, mixed with ash. It covered the bodies of the dead. It covered the ruins of the Hall of Justice. It covered the statues of the heroes. The age of heroes was over. The age of survival had begun. Far away, in the ruins of Central City, Billy Batson sat up. He was cold. He was alone. But he felt something. A spark. Faint. Almost imperceptible. The magic hadn't been destroyed. It had been hiding. With Zamasu gone, the natural laws were slowly, painfully snapping back into place. The rock of eternity was silent, but it was there. Billy closed his eyes and whispered, "Shazam." Nothing happened. No lightning. But he felt a warmth in his chest. A pilot light. It was a start. On the dark side of the moon, the glyph of the Kai burned out. The purple fire faded, leaving only cold, gray dust. The universe was scarred. The timeline was a patchwork of trauma. But it was still there. Luther looked at Batman. "What now, detective? The sun is dying. The food is gone. The governments are dust. What is the plan?" Batman looked at the seed in his hand. He looked at the frost forming on Superman's chest. He didn't smile. He never smiled. But his voice was steady. It was the voice that had commanded gods and monsters. "Now," Batman said, "we work." He didn't call for an evacuation. He didn't call for a speech. He started digging. He used his hands to clear the snow away from a patch of scorched earth. He planted the seed. It was a futile gesture, an insane gesture, but it was the only one that mattered. It was the first act of the new world. The darkness deepened. The stars came out, brighter than they had ever been, because the city lights were gone forever. Under the cold gaze of the cosmos, the three men, the alien, The billionaire and the detective sat in the wreckage of their victory. They were not gods. They were just men. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough. The invasion was over. The occupation was over. The silence was heavy, but it was theirs. The DC universe had survived, not by being stronger, but by being willing to lose everything to win. The file is designated Omega-0. It is the only remaining digital record in the bunker beneath what was once Wayne Manor. The timestamp indicates it was recorded 10 years after the event, now known as the Day of Divine Judgment. The world outside the bunker is quiet. The permanent cloud layer of ash and frozen atmospheric particulate blocks 80% of the sunlight. The Earth has returned to a glacial period. The great cities are tombs of ice and steel. The survivors live in subterranean arcologies or in the equatorial zones, where the temperature is barely survivable. There are no nations. There are only settlements. The flags of the old world are used as blankets. Clark Kent walks the perimeter of the Neo-Smallville agricultural dome. He wears a heavy, lead-lined suit, not for protection from kryptonite, but from the cold. He is mortal now. The red sun that hangs in the sky gives him no strength. He is an old man, aged prematurely by the burnout of his cells during the final strike. He does not fly. He tills the hydroponic gardens with his hands. He is the spiritual leader of the colony, teaching a generation of children who have never seen a blue sky about a time when men could fly. He tells them stories, but not of heroes. He tells them stories of hubris. He teaches them that power without humility is a death sentence. He never speaks the name Zamasu. He calls him the Great Filter. In the ruins of Metropolis, Lex Luthor and Bruce Wayne oversee the Helios Project. It is a machine the size of a city, built from the scavenged technology of the Watchtower, the Fortress of Solitude, and the crashed ships of the invasion. Its purpose is to fire a stream of concentrated chronal energy into the sun to accelerate its healing process. It is a project that will take 300 years to complete. Luthor does not sleep. He has replaced his failing organs with cybernetics derived from Brainiac's tech. He works with a cold, mechanical efficiency. He and Batman do not speak as friends. They speak as architects of a penance. They saved the world, but they know the price was the future they had promised to protect. Magic has returned, but it is feral. Billy Batson wanders the frozen wastes of the Midwest. He does not transform. The lightning is too dangerous to call down when the atmosphere is so fragile. He acts as a battery, siphoning excess wild magic that leaks from the rifts and grounding it before it can manifest monsters. He is a weary traveler, a gray wizard in a hoodie, keeping the nightmares at bay. The cult of black still exists in the deep shadows. They worship the frozen face on the source wall. They believe that one day the wall will crack and the purification will continue. They leave offerings of scrap metal and frozen flowers at the shrines they have built in the subway tunnels. The timeline itself has been quarantined by the greater multiverse. The Flash of Earth 3 tried to vibrate into this dimension and was disintegrated by the sheer density of the scar tissue around reality. This universe is a cautionary tale. It is a closed loop. At the edge of the universe, embedded in the gray stone of the sourced wall, the face of fused Zamasu remains. His expression is one of eternal screaming. He is the gargoyle that guards the prison of the survivors. He got what he wanted in twisted irony. He united the mortals. He made them one. He ended their wars. He forced them to evolve or die. The DC universe still exists, but it is no longer a story of superheroes. It is a story of endurance. The invasion is over, but the winter is eternal. And in the dark, the seed Batman planted has finally bloomed, A single green leaf against the gray, the only color left in a world of black and white.